Building good, deep relationships with clients and continuing to build those relationships and doing good work. Focus on those two things and the rest will figure their way out, because the brochure isn't what's going to make you a good partner. People are going to buy from you or think that this looks really smart. That's not going to be it. It's really about the depth of your relationships with your partners and the work that you can actually show customers that you've done or they can rely on, and they can go and share those experiences with other people who want to talk about you. That's what's going to be critical. As we established Revenue Management Labs, we knew the only thing that we could do to really differentiate ourselves was the work that we do. 90% of our business is repeat business, customers coming back to us. It's an old adage, but I do believe that your work or your quality speaks for itself. Even if you have clients that move from one organization to another, it's the trust that they build up and they can see the results, so they'll take you with them. The critical thing that's led to most of our success has been...
Welcome to Visionary Voices, a podcast where we connect with forward-thinking entrepreneurs to learn from their stories. I'm your host, Ida, and today we are joined by Avy Punwasee. Avy is the founder and managing partner at Revenue Management Labs, a company that understands better than most the importance of pricing. They believe that pricing is something that has a huge leverage on your financial statement bottom line, and they've made it their business to solve this complex and often overlooked aspect of business. Avy, your company is actually recognized as one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. So it's an absolute honor to have you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Let's take it away. So I want to dig more into your personal story, but we know that the business side is not completely separate from the personal side. So let's talk about first Revenue Management Labs and it being identified as one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. How did that happen?
It's funny, looking back at that, I kind of scratch my head and think about it as well. I think we're really in a good niche, and pricing is something that you don't necessarily get taught at school. How to do it. It's not like accounting or marketing or any of those other kind of functions, but every business does pricing. It doesn't matter what you do. So there's not a lot of companies out there, consultancies that are purely focused within pricing. So we're kind of in a great spot. And I think the other thing is I'm surrounded by a lot of talented individuals, and that's helped us grow substantially. And about 80% of our business is out of the US. So despite being a Canadian company, I often get asked, hey, why are all these big companies using a company out of Toronto? But one, it's the great work that we do. And two, it's a good niche to be in.
Are there companies in the US that do what you do?
Yeah, there are definitely companies in the US that do what we do, but we're kind of in a unique spot. We're about 36 people right now in our office. If we look at our main competitors, there's a lot of single shingles out there, and they don't necessarily have the people or the depth to engage with larger scale organizations, to really integrate themselves into the organization, understand the business, understand the unique ways that they need to go to market, and bring them customized solutions. And then there's this other group of consultancies out there that are kind of the big, all-seeing, all-knowing consultancies, but they're not totally just focused in pricing. They do everything else. So I think we're in a unique spot in that we can bring customized niche solutions just focused around pricing, but we're not necessarily looking to sell them everything else. We just want to do great work in one specific area of their business.
Has that always been the thing from the beginning of your business, wanting to focus on that one unique niche of pricing? Or did that happen over time to be like, okay, no, let's focus on this one because that's the thing?
It's always been in that area, but pricing is a little bit unique in that I say it's one unique piece, but given that the price is what a customer is actually going to buy at the end of the day, it affects everyone because it affects the sales line. So it affects salespeople's compensation. It affects how much the business is going to produce. It affects how much money we're going to make at the end of the day. So I say it's one thing, but it touches the organization right across. And that's why, at least for us right now, it's been more than enough to keep us busy because we're really touching everyone within the organization and having to get everyone aligned around the strategy and make them very comfortable that at the end of the day, it's taking the organization where it really needs to go.
Okay. So was it a goal to be one of the fastest growing companies in Canada, or did that just happen?
That was not a goal.
Okay.
I think our goal really was, we knew that as we established Revenue Management Labs, we wouldn't have the same brand equity that other organizations had out there. Like a lot of consultancies, they've been around for a fair amount of time. They've got established client base. So we knew the only thing that we could do to really differentiate ourselves was the work that we do. Mm-hmm. And how we wanted to position ourselves was having a lot of experience before we started Revenue Management Labs. The one gap that we saw was that consultancies that worked in the area, they were great at bringing recommendations, but they were very high level. When we looked at what companies really needed was the support to take those high level recommendations. How do we take that down to a customer? How do we take that down to a product or service? How do we think about the different contracts that we're dealing with and get really granular with the recommendations and helping companies think about, well, when should we be going and presenting that to customer? And how should we be presenting that to customer? And how do we track that our sales team has actually done it? And how do I make sure that the sales team's implemented and the price is uploaded in the system? That was really where we wanted to differentiate Revenue Management Labs. Not look at ourselves as an outside consultancy, but really look at ourselves as a partner and an internal partner that would understand your business, work with you, and not only work to produce a deck that shows you, hey, here's the pot of money, but go be with you through implementation as that gets implemented in the market, work with you to understand, did we actually realize what we had expected to realize? And number two, where we fell short, why did we fall short? And what do those next steps look like? Because what's actually interesting is when we find we fell short in certain instances, it's often things outside of pricing that are getting to us. So for example, maybe the sales team's not compensated in the right way. Maybe we don't have the right people. Maybe we need some more training. Maybe there's tools that need to be put in place or different reporting that needs to be put out to help enable the teams in different ways. So it's really not necessarily, we want it to be a partner organization that could go and hold hands with that, with our clients and make sure that we can drive that bottom line result. Because that's kind of the key things that we want to differentiate ourselves based on, is that the results that we commit to will deliver and actually exceed those results.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense, because from my learnings and from listening to a lot of entrepreneurs, I hear something which you're also saying. It's you focus on solving that problem, focus so much on delivering it and establishing yourself as the go-to person that will solve this problem for you. And everything else just kind of falls into place with that, right? Because you became so good at solving the problem that you grew even without trying to grow.
I think that's really critical to hit on because, 90% of our business is repeat business, customers coming back to us. And when you're not out there necessarily at conferences or putting these flyers out there or having your salespeople doing tons of active outreach, it's an old adage, but I do believe that your work or your quality speaks for itself. And even if you have clients that move from one organization to another, it's the trust that they build up and they can see the results, so they'll take you with them. And I think that's really what's helped us over the past 8 years really grow and scale our business. It's being almost paranoid around the quality that we're bringing to customers and ensuring that we don't stop working until we see the clients realize those results around pricing.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. Okay. What would you say was the single factor that either personally or within the business, what was it that led to the success that you have?
I think there's a couple things that led to the success. Consultancy and pricing consultancy is super unique in that consultancy, computers are important, but it's all about people and really the knowledge of the people. I think pricing consultancy makes it even more difficult in that not a lot of people have that knowledge or have that experience coming out of industry. So I think the critical thing that's led to most of our experience, to most of our success, has been really attracting the right type of talent, but being able to retain that talent. And why that has been such a critical success factor for Revenue Management Labs has been we look for certain competencies in individuals, people that have certain technical competencies that can communicate in the right way, but from a more of an attitude perspective, have a drive within them. They really want to problem solve. They're explorers. They don't know how we're going to solve things, but they do want to go ahead and try 5 different things at the same time. So one, we're looking for those right individuals. But then number 2 is really over-investing in those individuals to give them the skills, the competencies, the pricing toolkit so they can understand how we do things at Revenue Management Labs, and that natural inquisitiveness, that natural, hey, we go a step beyond. And I'll be open and blunt and honest. It's tough because clients come to us with really tight deadlines. They need to achieve things in certain times. Prices need to be changed at certain times so they can go and get the financial benefit, so they can see, hey, by Q2, dollars need to start falling. So I think what is the critical thing for us is finding the right people, enabling them in the right way, and especially in this economy, is making sure that they want to stay. And what's great is we're a company that's growing. So inherent on that is we need more leaders. We want more partners in Revenue Management Labs. So we're trying to create an organization where people, and I know this is very atypical these days, but we want them to start and end their career here, to be a real leader and grow much more with us as an organization as we continue to scale. So I think that's the critical aspect that's brought our success. It's the people, because the people at the end of the day do the business and they deliver the great results.
So as you're saying all of that, I wrote down one word: culture. So it's the company culture that has been built within the team, around you, and everybody who gets to be a part of the team gets to embrace that culture. I think this is a great segue to go from there to more personal. Like, if somebody is walking down the street and meets you, no, somebody who knows you very well, without saying what you do, how would they describe you? How would you describe yourself?
I'll give you a little bit of my background because I think that's, what I try to exhibit. My parents, they grew up in the West Indies, and my dad had to leave the country in his upper education. They both grew up, their parents were indentured slaves. They worked on sugar plantations in the West Indies. They had come over from India as indentured slaves. And one of the things with growing up in the sugar plantation, their kids actually got to go through the British system of schooling.
Okay.
So went through kind of O levels and A levels, and they would write exams. And based on those exams and how well you performed on those exams would kind of dictate what schools you could get to go to.
Mm-hmm.
So they performed really well, and they got the opportunity for the actual sugar plantation. They sent them to school in England. And based on that, going to school in England, they got to come back and went into a professional job, and they migrated over to Canada.
Okay.
So what my parents really gave to me was, you will go to school and you will take it very, very seriously.
That's very typical of immigrant parents. Yeah.
Exactly. And number 2 is that that heavy, work ethic of a culture. You're going to put in a lot of effort, but since they had seen kind of the upward migration, that your work pays off for itself.
Yeah.
So I think that what they would say is that, one, you're going to find someone who will try to outwork everyone, right, and will bring that every day. It's kind of tireless, but at the same time, it's all that other cultural aspects that come into play, that the people that you're surrounded around are very important as well. And we all grow as a community, and it's important that we take care of one another, and those personal aspects are important as well. So I think those elements would be, well, I hope those elements would be talked about as they'd ask you, who is Avy? How does Avy do things? At the same time, as I think about where I came from, they don't mince words too, right? There's not a lot of niceties. If you're doing something that's wrong, you'll know that you're doing something that's wrong. You don't always know that you're doing something that's right.
Oh, yeah.
You won't always get the accolades, hey, good job. You'll definitely know that you're doing something that's wrong. So I think that's where I come from, is very open communication, but open communication with love as well. That you're giving this not to hurt this person, but to help uplift them, to help develop them, so we can go further, faster together.
Okay. So would your colleagues or your staff openly come up to you to tell you if something you're doing is wrong?
Definitely. It's funny because as we get bigger, one of the dynamics that I've been kind of playing through is that we're a really close culture. We've always had a work hard, play hard culture. We like to spend time with each other. We're incredibly candid with one another. We spend so much time around each other, but I think about each other as family.
Okay.
And it's funny that as we've grown, and I still think we're small because I know everyone, but some people stand on ceremony now that, hey, I'm at this level and you're trying to have this discussion with someone who might just be new to the organization. And it's a much different dynamic. But for me, I'm extremely candid, extremely informal. I don't stand on title. I believe in open door policy. And if anyone's having an issue or sees something wrong, we want to encourage, that's why you're here. We all act like owners. We do things that are not in our job description that we never, ever thought we would ever touch. Mm-hmm. But that's what we're continuing to try to build, because I think that free flow of ideas and information and challenging and conflict, that's how we get better together and killing that bureaucracy or politicking.
Yeah. Okay. So what is something that you remember doing that was kind of like a surprise to a new person that just joined your firm? Something that somebody could look like, no, the CEO shouldn't be doing this job. What is something that someone was surprised that you're doing?
I even think about the things that so just today, we were looking at, for some reason, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but the ice out of the fridge tasted funny today on the ice maker. So then, people were kind of complaining about it, and we're talking about it. Hey, the water tastes funny. So all of a sudden, me and one of the directors were Googling around why the water might be tasting funny, because we changed the water filter the other day, and that can't be the issue. And it's something that's affecting everyone. We probably shouldn't be taking a huge amount of our day, but now it's kind of at the top of the list, and everyone's kind of focused on it and trying to troubleshoot why. But it's just those kind of little elements that I think it's important that we don't necessarily place ourselves above one another and say, hey, give this to someone, they're going to figure it out. Yeah. But taking ownership on something that's actually important and it's affecting people, how do we go at it? So it's even small stuff, like thinking about, I never thought we would have to get involved on thinking about, well, how does a vacation policy look? But it's a small thing, but it's also a huge thing, because how people work at, and I'll share our vacation policy in Revenue Management Labs. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily say it's based on tenure, it's based on seniority within the company. What ours is based on is we really encourage people to take the time that they need. And for some people, the hours of the day, they're working 16-hour days for kind of, a 5-day stretch. Well, or they've got a huge client meeting that they're coming up to. we don't want to, like I said at the start, we don't want to burn people out. We want people to be here that are going to be leaders over this organization over a long point of time. So we don't have a fixed vacation policy. If people need sabbatical, for a month to, be able to de-stress, come back to where they need to be, that's what we need to do to make sure that we can actually hold our people and make sure that we're developing them in the right way over the long term.
Wow.
But it's all these kind of elements. And I think for me, what's important about it, it's not necessarily saying, hey, you play in this box and you play in this box. No, we're all part of the team here. We're growing quickly. We're still very much, I'd like to think, in our garage. But how do we do these things in the right way with taking the best from everyone and bringing that to bring optimal solutions within the organization?
Yeah. And I think in saying that, you just came back to validate again for me the point that you said before, which is the reason for the success you've had so far is the people. You attract the right talent, you retain the right talent, and it's just the culture is the way you treat your people. So it's just, for me, testament to what you said before, and this just correlating again with it.
I think that's a great point because, I come back to the ice, someone could just say, that's not my problem, and walk away. And that's not the personality or the attitude that we want someone to exhibit. Because if they exhibit it with something like that, how do we ensure they don't exhibit it when an employee is saying that something's wrong? How do we make sure they don't exhibit it when a client is saying that something's wrong? So we're really looking for people that are good listeners and are natural helpers too, or want to engage and want to solve problems.
Do you find that a lot of businesses are missing that these days?
I do. I think some of it is that you get too big and there's so much process and there's so much bureaucracy. I think sometimes other times it's organizations not necessarily listening to people or listening to their employees or listening to good ideas. So if your ideas aren't being heard or if your ideas aren't being actioned or you're hearing that there's a problem, you just stop listening or you stop speaking, right? I'm going to play in my lane and it's much easier. But what I really try to encourage, and I know sometimes it's uncomfortable, is I believe that conflict, it takes us to better places. There's ways to have conflict in constructive ways, but having discussions, pushing people out of their comfort zones, and also celebrating when we do or achieve something great, or it's something different where someone really went above and beyond. Making sure that people it should be something living and breathing versus the stagnant 9 to 5, because that's where I find that, you run into more of these issues.
Yeah, and a lot of burnout. I want to think back to an early client success that you would have had. I listened to you speak on the Unleashed podcast with Will Bachman. And so I heard the whole automobile story that you talked about and how you went ahead and implemented all of the pricing strategies and all. I want to think a little bit earlier than that, even to one of your earliest client successes where to you, like it just validated for you, like this thing that we're doing, like this is it. This is the problem we're meant to be solving. Can you remember anything from that far back?
Yeah. So it was a small company. It was actually sub $10 million. So, now we deal with companies of all sizes, but a lot of companies are pretty big in terms of their revenue base. This one's kind of unique. And they were a small company out of Winnipeg. They were producing RV parts.
Okay.
And what we had done a talk they were kind of in the CEO self-help group, and we had done a talk on the importance of pricing, and they had approached us and said, hey, what about us? Like, how would we do something like this? And we had never worked in that industry before, never had kind of touched that business before. What we did was we went in and essentially we looked at 3 things. We said, okay, let's get an understanding of who your competitors are. Let's get an understanding of how your financials are, and let's get an understanding of your customers. And the customers was the biggest thing, honestly. So We saw that they were competing with a lot of cheap stuff out in the market.
Okay.
And what we were able to find by looking at various sources, talking to their customers, talking to people who redistributed their products, was that there was a lot of value that they were bringing to their customers in that I didn't know this before, but when certain parts in your RV get broken, one, the people who own these RVs, they're like second homes. In a lot of instances, they have more pride in these second homes than anything. Like, they're absolutely meticulous in how these things are maintained. So when these parts get broken, it's not often clear what part you need to replace it. There's a lot of alternatives out there in the market. It's not very clear what will fit properly and what's the proper grade of quality. So this organization had invested an incredible amount to not only help users with what will fit their product properly, but to even help them kind of step through that incredibly complicated journey and make sure that they have everything they need to install the product. Once we came to this understanding, we looked at what the competitors were delivering, the price points that they were at, and the quality that they were delivering versus what we were doing. We could really, with confidence, instill, hey, these are the price gaps that we can command in the market, which were much more substantial than we would ever think about. And here's how we message that and help not only our channel partners understand that and how it makes much more sense to sell our products and it's going to be much more lucrative for you, but also drive your customer engagement. But here's how we actually message that to customers and communicate that to customers. And what was interesting for us is not only with taking such a substantial shift in the pricing structure and how substantial the profit improvement was to the organization, but the volumes improved as well. So more customers were coming into the fold because we more deeply understood what the customers' needs were and how to communicate with those customers. And we were reinforcing that with the pricing. It really helped us. Hey, this is not, if you're doing this in the right way and you're understanding what's going on in the market, understanding what's going on with the customers, and understanding what's happening from a financial perspective, you can really unlock a lot of value that's there on the table and enable a much deeper understanding of the business internally, but externally as well, and partnering the two together.
So when you talked about channel partners, what are you referring to?
So in some instances, they were selling their product directly to customers. In some instances, they were actually selling to distributors. And the distributors were turning around and they were selling the product out there, or they're selling to repair shops, and the repair shops were selling those products out there. So they have a multitude of suppliers that they can choose to work with, but being able to go to those suppliers and being able to go to those distributors or those repair shops and helping them understand, here's why we're the right solution for you. We will make your repair much faster. We'll make sure you get the right part at the right time. We actually have those parts stocked for you. And hey, as you're selling our products at a higher price point, and you're going to make more margin, dollar margin, actually make more money installing our products. At the same time, your customer is going to be much more happy, because if you go ahead and you're installing these other products, here's the risk that you're opening yourself up to. And let's help you understand that and giving them a view into the market of, hey, these are how satisfying those customers are. And here's the rate of repurchase. And do you necessarily pretend you're doing a much bigger job for your customer? Do you really want to risk this small piece of the transaction over this much larger piece of the transaction? So it's helping them think through all those things and become more of a valued, trusted partner.
Okay, awesome. So how important would the emotional state of the client be in making that decision? Because you're talking pricing, right? And I think people buy based on, not necessarily based on logic. Sometimes it's based on emotion, because you can't explain why people buy some expensive things at times. But that emotional state, or whatever it is that makes that client to buy, would also impact in a way the level at which you were able to set up your prices, right?
100%. Pricing is very much around understanding these emotions or these people's emotions around these value drivers, and putting some quantification to it. So when you go to Walmart and when you're sitting in front of the detergent aisle, you've got kind of a football field of detergent in front of you and you got all these tags all over the place. And you're probably looking at this thing maybe for 7 seconds, right? Yeah. You're going to grab something. And it's amazing how much your brain is processing in that time, right?
Yeah.
In that, hey, I know there's certain brands that I'll trade off between. I know there's a certain size of detergent that I need. I know I'm a pod consumer or I'm a liquid consumer or I'm looking for cold water. I know I am a Tide consumer, but hey, if Cheer goes on for that much of a discount, I'm going to switch. Or maybe I am totally a loyal consumer. What's absolutely critical is us understanding what are those groups of consumers that are out there? What are the emotions or the value drivers that they're going through, quantifying those elements, and then thinking about, because we only have one price on the shelf, right? And we have all these different consumers. We even have the consumer, if I have something on my shopping list that someone's put down there and I'm going to get in trouble if I don't get that exact thing, it doesn't matter if the price is 7 times more. I'm going to buy that thing.
Yeah.
Right? You want to make sure it's the perfect thing, and you don't want to go back to that store. So understanding in that we have that one price, how do I set that one price or put that one promotion when I'm dealing with all of these different customer groups that I'm going to be able to maximize my sales and maximize the profitability and continually adjust to the market as competitors are doing things.
Right.
So you're very right that it is reading how customers are going to behave. It's a lot of times it's around emotion.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. How we deal with that?
To get the pricing right, like you said, it's definitely going to affect the bottom. It affects everything else within the company, you have to get it right.
Yeah. So how we deal with that is we're trying to get data from multiple sources. So one, we're looking at companies have done a lot in the past when they've moved around prices, when they've changed their offers and whatnot, getting all that data, all that transactional data. We are talking to individuals within the company. Okay, help me understand what you think the customers are that you're dealing with, how they make decisions, how do they shop. Then we're going to the actual customers themselves. And we can be, depending on what industry we're working with, we could be doing interviews, focus groups, running surveys, running actual in-market tests, and we're putting different pricing scenarios in front of customers. And we're asking them to trade off between those different pricing scenarios, and they're doing their purchasing. So we're taking all of this data, we're putting it together, we're building some pretty complicated financial models around that. Mm-hmm. And then we're looking at where that comes out to, and we're working with the organization and thinking about, okay, here's kind of where the optimal is. If we could execute this in the market, that's perfect. Here's where we're sitting today. It's not always pretty. There's a lot of steps in between. Mm-hmm. And then we're working with the organization to what's feasible on a customer by customer basis. How do we start taking some steps towards the optimal? And it's not necessarily as easy as, hey, we're going to change the price from $5 to $5.25. It's about, and here's where emotion comes in again, because now we need to go, let's make sure that our sales team believes that this is a good price out there. They're not going to lose a ton of sales. They're going to still get their commission that they're going to get. And then get our customers on board that, hey, this is the right thing to do. Here's what the customer needs are. You're going to end up making more money if you're selling at these prices. And then making sure that we have the right proposition to customers. So it's one, getting the right answer, but then how do we, what is the optimal answer? What's the realistic answer? And then how do we have a realistic plan to get there that brings everyone along and educates everyone, aligns everyone as we go through it?
Wow. It sounds like such a complicated process in my head. And how long does it take? Okay, let's say you're going to implement price changes, right? And this might be a silly question. Let's say you want to implement price changes with let's say there is let's go Walmart, because everybody listening can relate
Yep.
to that. Do you implement at the Walmart level, or do you implement at the level of the different manufacturers of products that get into Walmart?
Yeah, so the typical consultant answer, it depends. So if we're dealing with the Walmarts and Krogers and Loblaws of the world, you're looking at certain sell-in windows. So we have to present to them like 90 to 160 to 90 to 120 days in advance. And then we have to get them to buy off on what we're presenting to them and say that it's okay. Then we have to upload it into their system, and then it'll take impact. If we're dealing with e-commerce, we've dealt with a lot of people that sell on Amazon, and the pace at which that price can move could be, we could be moving that price like 12 times a day, depending on what's happening. It really depends on the industry. What are the windows that you can price within? How long it takes us to get out to customers and for them to sell through inventory that they have within their warehouses. And that's why it's so unique. And that's one of the critical things. I know I kind of started with it at the start around not just delivering a solution, but the critical thing is being there through that implementation, because it is so complicated. Customers are going to want to negotiate with you. Your sales team's going to fall down in certain instances, and being there and working with your partners to make sure that you get to that right solution and you're able to take that right solution through to market and get it in front of the customers and get it implemented in the right way. That's kind of the keys to the castle and really how you realize the improvements around pricing.
Okay. How will this work in a service-based business?
Yeah, in a service-based business, at the end of the day, whether you're pricing a product, a service, technology, you're always dealing with the same kind of underlying premise. And what that underlying premise is we're trying to understand, there's a couple things. One, we're trying to understand what are the different groups of customers that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
For each of those groups of customers that we're dealing with, which groups of customers are more price sensitive and less price sensitive. And then the last thing that we're looking at for the customers is what's important to them. And when I say what's important to them, and we can take a simple thing like detergent. One of the things that you might say is detergent, well, it has to get the clothes clean. Well, every detergent's going to get the clothes clean, right? That's not like So what we're looking at with customers is what are those differentiating attributes that someone's going to think about as they're going to buy it? So what are those critical things as they look at two different detergents on the shelf that they're going to say, this makes a difference to me? So for example, something like brand. Yep. Brand will make a difference to me. That'll actually be a key differentiating attribute.
Yeah.
So we get all these things together, and then it's really about weighing, looking at what are the competitors and scoring against that, and understanding, given how we're scoring within these different customer groups, and given how we're performing, are we overpriced or underpriced, and how do we get that price into the right spot? And so for services, it's really no different. It's just understanding those key underlying attributes and having that clarity. Now, as I say that, it's, I put it across and it's pretty simple, but getting to those answers, it's tough because you've got to be interacting with your customers. You have to be analyzing the data. You have to be listening to the market versus listening to yourself.
Yeah. And I, I'm thinking of the detergent example you gave there. And I remember reading in a book by, I think it's Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. And I think he did
Yeah,
this research on Febreze. And it turns out what people were actually drawn to was the smell. It wasn't even about whether it looks cleaner or not. Look, it doesn't look cleaner. It was about what does it smell like. So you might be looking at it's this set of variables that matter, but the customer is looking at something completely different. It's that other thing that matters to me.
totally. It's that, and what we often find, and is the real point where I feel really proud, is where we're dealing with individuals who extremely bright on our client side. They've been working in these businesses, for 15 or 20 years. They're responsible for the P&L, and they live and breathe these businesses. And where we're able to come in and kind of turn on a light bulb for them that, hey, this has kind of shifted me in terms of how you're telling me that clients actually perceive our offer and what's important to them, and how we can shift in terms of not only from a pricing and our offer perspective, but how we probably need to shift in what we should be developing or how we should be communicating to them. Because these elements that we've been talking about, some of these are table stakes. We need to really be focusing on, what they're looking for from us or what they're seeing as important, so we can further distance ourselves from competition and kind of go farther faster.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it goes back to the point where you said you're more like a partner to them, right? You come in and you work with them as a part, not just like an external consultant you are, but you really partner with them to get results for them that are going to make a difference in their finances, in their business.
Exactly.
If you could think back to a few years back when you were starting out, what is something that right now, with all the knowledge you have, something that you wish you would have known back then, and that if you knew would have made a difference in life or in business?
I think one of the things that I would try, if I could go back and tell myself back then, is that, we've always kind of thought about what is the important ways that are going to grow the business. So we would spend time on like making a brochure, or go and making this perfect brochure, or let's go ahead and make this perfect YouTube video about ourselves, or let's go ahead and make this perfect kind of elevator pitch about ourselves that we can talk about ourselves in 1 minute. And there was so much time and effort in that. And what I think I would go back and counsel ourselves on is there's two things I would instead encourage to focus on. Building good, deep relationships with clients and continuing to build those relationships and doing good work. Focus on those two things, and the rest will kind of figure their way out, because the brochure isn't what's going to make you a good partner. People are going to buy from you or think that this looks really smart, or attending that conference. That's not going to be it. It's really about the depth of your relationships with your partners and the work that you can actually show customers that you've done, or they can rely on, and they can go and share those experiences with other people who want to talk about you. That's what's going to be critical to really scale the business. And that's what I think I'd go back and say. But, back when you're starting out, every word matters, or what color we're going to use on this matters. But it's not that important in retrospect.
Oh my God. Okay. And I'm thinking of a different question there. So often, and I've seen this with a lot of entrepreneurs, their parents don't get what they're doing. Do your parents get what you're doing, or how would you explain what you do to your parents?
I think I'm a little bit unique in this matter, because when we started the business, I was actually a director at the time in Labatt. and had a really good job. And we were kind of contemplating whether to start the business because it was a real big shift. And another person, Michael, who's one of the founding partners with me too, we were thinking about going to start this business. So we went and talked to my dad because my dad was pretty good in like accounting and all that legal stuff. And we explained the concept of what we were going to go after. And we had been doing pricing forever. So he understood. And what was great was he said, you know what, if you guys really want to go down this path, I'll help you. I'll do all the back end stuff for you. And you guys just focus on driving the business, doing a good job and building the business, get the people you need, but I'll do all the kind of ugly legal accounting stuff on the back end and you guys can worry about the front. So I think we've been really blessed in that regard that I know it's not always good to work with family, but he's not in the everyday, but he is in the strategic things that him and Michael can kind of go and bun fight. And at the same time, me and Michael, we're like brothers and we fight each other. Mm-hmm. So he can step in like the parent and say, listen, time to clean it up. And here's the questions you guys need to answer. So we've been kind of blessed in that regard that he's been there. He's been a great sounding block and he's not in the day-to-day, but he's wide enough and he has enough perspective that he can help direct us back on which way we need to go. So we've been lucky from that regard. Given that he is the only one in my family who understands what we're doing.
Okay. So I was going to say that's truly unique, but it is still unique. It is still very unique because I listened to Alex Hormozy and his dad never got what he did until like a very long time later. A lot of entrepreneurs whose parents don't get it until much later. So, okay. So what then would your mom say about it?
My mom would think that we do something around pricing, has no idea what we do for pricing. We've probably contributed to pricings going up out there, but she doesn't understand very much how we get to what we get to. She often says she has no idea how people hire us in the first place, but God bless her.
So if you ever needed to get your ego in check, it's like, okay, mom, come talk to me.
Yeah, mom's the right person.
Oh, Lord, that is so beautiful. I don't want to take too much of your time. If you could leave us with some parting words for people, something specific to pricing, number one, and number two, something specific to entrepreneurship, and your word of advice to anyone listening right now.
Yeah, I think there's two things. One, as we looked at the market, one of the most frequent questions we get asked, despite the scale of the business, is, hey, what is happening out there in the market? Like, what are other companies taking from a pricing perspective? People often look to the consumer price index, but it's not specific enough to their business. What we did in the last year was we ran a 2024 executive pricing survey. And it was about with 500 senior executives within organizations who knew what their organizations had took for pricing, what they actually achieved, and what they were planning for taking to pricing in 2024. This was both in North America and Europe, and we had it broken down across various industries. One, if you're asking yourself, are we taking the right amount of pricing and what's going to help make it successful? I think that survey, it's going to be a pretty useful tool. So at any time, they can reach out to Revenue Management Labs, and we'd be happy to provide you a copy of that survey. I think that's one piece that I would leave your audience with. The second piece is, if you're a business that hasn't really thought about pricing or has thought about pricing that my costs are here and I take this much margin and here's where my price is, or here's where competition is, so here's where my price is, I'd really recommend you to sit back and even notionally think about pricing, think about what value you're delivering to customers. The return on investment that you will give yourself, I am willing to guarantee you, will be higher than any other area of your business, and you will see it faster than any other area of your business. So those are the two things that I'd really want your viewers to take away from today.
Can you share the link for the survey?
Yes, I will. If you go to revenueml.com, right away it flashes up. All you need to do is click on the link there, and you can input your email address. We'll fire out the survey to you. But it's great because it'll tell you what people achieved in 2023 and what they achieve, what they're planning on achieving in 2024. And what's also great is that we looked at overachievers, and they had kind of 6 common qualities. And I think what it's kind of looking back, it's intuitive, but I think if businesses keep these 6 items or 6 practices at the front of their mind and continue to harp on those elements, it'll make them much smarter in terms of what they actually realize.
Oh, that is awesome. And for those who want to know what that is, go to revenueml.com and you will find all of that information right there. I believe the best place to get in contact with you would be LinkedIn if someone wanted to reach out to you, right?
Definitely LinkedIn or Avy Punwasee at revenueml.com. Feel free to reach out at any time. Look forward to engaging.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to include the links to everything you shared in the description below. If you're listening on the podcast, check the show notes, and YouTube, check the description below. Thank you so much for being with us today, Avy.
Thank you, Ida. Appreciate it.
For more insightful conversations with entrepreneurs, check out this video right here. I think you'll love it. Continue to enjoy, and I'll see you there.